Thank you very much for being here, and some of you braving some weather and coming some distance to be here. I'm Jeff Lucas with the Western Water Assessment Research Program at the University of Colorado. We'll say a little more about us in a little bit. And
I'm Marcy Bidwell with Mountain Studies Institute and also representing San Juan Headwaters Forest Health Partnership, which is an extension of the Mixed Conifer Working Group that started over in Pagosa.
So we're here today to talk and think and discuss bark beetles and their impacts on watersheds, particularly water supply, including both runoff amount and timing and water quality. I want to kick things off because we know we've got a large Forest Service contingent here, and of course the spruce beetle infestation in the San Juans is almost entirely on Forest Service owned land. So we wanted to have someone from the Forest Service give us a little perspective and background on what the infestation looks like from their angle, how they're considering moving forward. Kevin Kung, the Pagosa District Ranger, was going to be here, couldn't make it. So in his place, Scott Wagner, who's a forester on the Pagosa District, standing in and will give us another welcome and talk a little bit about the infestation. Thanks, Scott.
So I kind of was the fallback choice. Kevin went up to Denver on Monday and was kind of concerned with the weather. They wouldn't get back down here, and of course he got stuck up there in the snowstorm and sent me an email yesterday. He said, "You're going to have to do it." Steve Harvickson, if you know him, is on vacation. A few other people who probably would have been fallback are all gone, so it all came to me. But if you don't know me, I'm a fuels forester and silviculturist on the Pagosa Ranger District, which occupies the eastern third of the San Juan National Forest, and Pagosa Springs is basically at the base of Wolf Creek Pass as you come down from the east, and it's an interesting district to work on because we have really a lot of diversity in terms of tree species and terrain and vegetation. The San Juan National Forest, for those of you who are new to the area, is basically on the west side of the Continental Divide. It's about 1.2 million acres, comes from almost the New Mexico border on the southwest and almost to Utah, on the southeast and almost to Utah on the west. It's a very diverse forest, and elevations range from about 6,000 feet to over 14,000 feet, and numerous ecozones from desert shrub, desert grassland, all the way to alpine tundra. So it's a very interesting place to work and to recreate. Within the San Juan National Forest, we have 3 wilderness areas, part of the largest wilderness area in Colorado. We've got 2 national monuments. One national monument is adjacent on BLM lands. We have a new national monument, Chimney Rock, recently dedicated on the Pagosa Ranger District and the Columbine Ranger District. And we have a special area, the Piedra area. We have other research natural areas. It's a very diverse and interesting place. When I first was aware of this conference and was invited to speak, I will be speaking later, I saw the title, The San Juan Beetles, and I thought maybe a new beetle had been discovered that I wasn't aware of. But I first became aware of the spruce beetle epidemic, which originated to our east over on the Rio Grande National Forest, so we blame them for it. I was hiking on the Continental Divide Trail just north of Wolf Creek Pass at the headwaters of the San Juan River, the West Fork of the San Juan, and I came to a point and looked down and I could see the whole West Fork in this giant bowl. And it was all yellow, green, red, gray. The whole basin was about 90% dead England spruce. And I knew, we had pockets of spruce beetle all around, and we were talking about it, but that was when it first hit me, the scale of the current epidemic. And that was a few years ago. The epidemic was slowly developing here. All the attention was focused on the mountain pine beetle in the northern part of the state, Wyoming, Montana, and British Columbia. Well, this little thing was kind of happening in the background, and few people knew about it because it was mostly in the backcountry, in the wilderness, and few people actually saw it. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, all of a sudden, a bunch of trees started turning yellow on the north side of the highway on Wolf Creek Path. And all of a sudden, we were bombarded by questions like, what are you going to do with all the dead trees? What are you going to do about all those dying trees up there? And what about the fire hazard? And a whole number of questions that our answers were pretty much, we don't know. We can't really do a whole lot. So that's sort of how it evolved. The importance of the fetal epidemic to us focuses on a lot of things. It's occurring in the high elevation forests where we have a lot of Canadian sensitive species. We've got Canadian lynx up there. We've got boreal owls, moose. It's a place where the elk and deer spend the summer. There's Uncompahgre fritillary. It's not in the spruce zone, but we do have it on the forest. We've been watching this develop for a number of years as it is progressing on the Rio Grande National Forest and moving towards the west, towards the area just north of us here. Just last summer I was up in the area of Mullis Pass and saw pockets of spruce beetle all over. Just little individual pockets, which is kind of the first indicator that, it's going to be spreading, and in the next couple of years we'll start seeing more and more. And then all of a sudden the people driving the San Juan Skyway will be going, what are they going to do about all those dead trees? So it's kind of a quiet little thing that happens in the background, and then all of a sudden you notice it 6 years later. Our primary concerns, I was asked to talk a little bit about our management concerns and so forth, related to beetles. First off, I want to point out that spruce beetle is only one of numerous bark beetles that are very active right now in southwestern Colorado. We have Doug fir beetle, which has been killing Doug fir trees for a long time, but most recently it has really taken off. It hasn't been as obvious because it's always in that mixed conifer zone where there's a lot of other species, and so you just see individual trees. But some of the largest Douglas fir trees in Colorado have been recently killed. As a matter of fact, the number 2 tree on the champion tree list was recently killed over by Pagosa by Douglas fir beetle. We have fir engraver. It's been up and down for the last few years. In the early 2000s, the pinyon ips got a lot of attention. In the Four Corners areas, it was killing a lot of pinyon trees. The ponderosa pine down here has been holding its own fairly well. There's been an endemic population of western bark beetles and occasional mountain pine beetle, but we haven't seen a whole lot. People keep asking us, how come? There's a lot of theories and reasons why, but we've been lucky that we haven't seen large outbreaks of beetles in the pine. It could happen. Could happen. We have a lot of posts out there, a lot of dense pine stands that are susceptible to the beetle. But of course, the spruce beetle is the one that's capturing the most attention right now. And we'll be talking primarily about that today. From a management point of view, most of it is in the high country, in the wilderness, and the roadless areas and remote areas where actively there's very little we can do either to salvage the trees or to do any preventive activities. But it's moving into areas where we do have more management options. Our primary concerns right now are for the safety of our employees and the public that are going to be in these areas. We're going to start seeing impacts on our infrastructure corridors, our trails in the high country, and then our roads. And we're going to have to try to figure out how we're going to mitigate those impacts on the budgets. There's a lot of questions about the fire, how that's going to affect the fire risk and fire hazard, and I'll be talking about that later. There's also a lot of questions about, and that's the objective of this workshop, about watershed health. water quality, water quantity, timing of runoff. And we're going to be talking about that today. And I think that's a really important and critical concern about the disturbances that are taking place in our forests. And the thing to consider is it's not just the beetle. We're seeing earlier snow melt because of climate change. We're seeing dust on snow events. We're seeing more fires. We're expecting to even see more fires in the future. There's a cumulative things, numerous things that are happening that are affecting our forests on the San Juan District forest right now and throughout Colorado and the West. And it's kind of hard to separate each and every individual little thing and say, this is because of the beetles, this is because of climate change or whatever. They're all interacting together. And the big question is what is the future of our forest going to look like? How is it going to affect our lifestyles here in southwest Colorado? I think the big consideration right now with the spruce beetle is that it's a recreation area. It's ski areas, it's cross-country skiing, it's snowmobiling, it's hiking, fishing, backpacking, outfitter guides. That's what's going on in that zone right now. And there's a lot of people that are wondering, how's that going to affect it? That's a big part of the tourism in southwest Colorado. People come here to ski, to play, to hunt. And will that affect it? Well, I think that the animals are going to make it one way or the other, but there's a lot of concern about all of that. So without any more comments at this point, I'm going to welcome you to southwest Colorado, and I hope the weather clears up so that you can be able to see some of our beautiful country. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. To really follow through on that question about this is exactly what we're here to talk about today, is how forest and water interact. We have a Mountain Studies Institute and San Juan Headwaters Forest Health Partnership partnered with Western Water Assessment to help lead this effort. Western Water Assessment is a science outreach organization that's a part of the University of Colorado, and to tell us more about Western Water Assessment, I'd like to introduce Eric Gordon.
Thanks, Marcy. So my name is Eric Gordon. I'm the Managing Director of the Western Water Assessment. You see we have multiple logos on the bottom of this agenda, and you'll see way too many more logos today, and we apologize in advance for the confusion. But we partnered with MSI. We are involved with several other institutions, so there's no real way of getting around all the different logos and affiliations. But to try to give a brief explanation of who we are and why we're here, we are a research and service organization based at the University of Colorado, the one in Boulder, so please try not to hold that against us. We have been working since 1999. We are funded by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to try to figure out how to bring climate-related information of all different kinds to bear on resource management in the Intermountain West, specifically Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. A lot of what we've done is actually worked on how climate variability and climate change impact water resources in this region. And over the past few years, we've kind of combined that with some ecosystem impacts, which is what brought us to working on bark beetle and water issues. Happens to be a nice confluence of climate impacts, water impacts, and ecosystem impacts all dovetailing together. So what we try to do in general is both conduct research, but also make research available, applicable, and relevant to the kinds of people like yourselves who are interested in what this research means. So we take the research that's done at University of Colorado, at federal agencies and others, and we try to synthesize it, repackage it, and make it much more oriented towards what actual users need instead of just sort of science driving science. So a lot of what we've tried to do is get those who are working together from a science perspective on bark beetle and water issues together to do a little more synthesizing of knowledge, and that's what you'll see today is sort of our attempt to synthesize a lot of that knowledge. And we also try to get scientists to respond a little bit more to what stakeholders really need to know about what's going on. So the bark beetle infestation has been, even though it's not necessarily the sort of greatest thing to happen to our forest, it's a really nice thing to happen in terms of allowing us an opportunity to weave a little bit of climate science and climate information into forest and water management. And it actually has helped bring together the forest and water communities quite well, which is something we're always eager to see because forests drive our watersheds and they drive our water supplies in this region. So that's about as long as I feel like I want to bother taking to describe ourselves, other than to say we are a research program based at University of Colorado within something called the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences. So these are really long, unnecessary university acronyms to describe where we are. But we have a website, www.colorado.edu. There's a 2-page handout on the front table over there that you could probably grab, or you could grab any of us if you're interested in learning more about what we do. So thanks again for coming. I'd like to then let Marcy say the same thing about MSI and San Juan Headwaters Forest Health Partnership.
We've been working on a shorter name, and I think San Juan Headwaters is going to stick because the acronym of just the first letters is SJHFP, and it's horrible. And so Jimbo Biakaru with San Juan Citizens Alliance suggested we take the first consonant and the vowel, and then we end up with Saha Hipa, which is also not really rolling off the tongue for me. So anyway, we'll go with San Juan Headwaters and just make it easy for everybody else. San Juan Headwaters was started as a mixed conifer working group, and it was a collection of the exact effort that Eric was just describing, where citizen scientists and local land managers joined together to say, we have the mixed conifer forest over the San Juan public lands, and we know very little bit about how the warm, dry, and the cool, moist really integrate together and what the best management practices are. And so looking at how our forests have been developing over time, and we're trying to do exactly what Mountain Studies Institute does, which is help us to identify and articulate the needs, and then define the resources and the partnerships to be able to put that information into action. And where necessary, we form teams to do research and ask important questions. And then we also work on making sure that we translate that information into tools. And so we have been really excited about how this partnership has started and gone forward, and in the next 2 years we're going to be adding not just a look at forest health, but interest in watershed priorities, and particularly for Pagosa with some of the fires that have happened immediately in their area, as well as Colorado Springs, Durango, the Weber fire. They've realized that their water infrastructure is very much also possibly at risk, and that's something that they've just never slowed down enough to consider how fire and water might interact with their watershed. So we want to give thanks to our sponsors who's helping fund the San Juan Headwaters Initiative, which includes the Archuleta County Title III money, and then also funding from the Southwest Water Conservation District. And then clearly our partnership with San Juan National Forest is really also what makes it possible. Because in the conversation about our forests and health, it's public lands, but it's also private lands. And so we're working to bring those all together. And we also regularly partner with Firewise of Southwest Colorado, who is also a very vital partner in bringing citizens to the table as well. So that's enough about today. The purpose is to talk about watersheds and forest health. And thank you very much for being here.
I'm with the Florida Conservation District. I'm also involved with the San Juan Watershed, San Juan Conservation Association, which is a collection of 6 conservation districts in this area, from Pagosa to Guthrie. I'm also on the board of the Animal Product Water Conservancy District, so I've got a vested interest in a lot of different topics, simply watershed and conservation oriented. If I'm not speaking loud enough, probably because I've got a hearing aid on, I sound really loud. Conservation districts came out of the 30s from the Dust Bowl problems. How do we go on here?
Push the arrow.
It's too simple. Originally, we started out with an interest solely in soil health and soil, keeping it down on the ground where it belongs. That has expanded over the years. We were incorporated or formed in 1947. We were chartered under the state of Colorado to operate. If we wanted to, we could go for a mill levy. We haven't done that here. Of the 76 districts in the state, 11 of them have a mill levy. Today we're interested in basically these topics. We cover, this isn't right, is it? Most of the county, there's a piece down here we don't cover because that's Pine River Conservation District. And our focus is on landowners. And that includes forest health, wildlife-urban interface between forestry and the urban area. What we do is we try to pass knowledge between people who have knowledge and people who are seeking knowledge, and that's why we wanted to partner with this organization and the groups that are presenting here, because we have a vested interest in what you're interested in and the research that comes out of the school systems, out of the Colorado University system. We are not research oriented. We are mostly fingernails and dirty fingernails. We get our hands in and we get involved at the local level. We conduct several workshops through the year. We just conducted a small acreage workshop recently. We give scholarships. We go to the fourth graders to do an Arbor Day program, and we support 4-H and FH and FFA. We partnership principally with the NRCS, which is a part of the Department of Ag. We partner with Colorado State Conservation Board. These other folks, also Pam Becker with WaterWise, no, FireWise. She wishes she had more water. We are totally self-funded with the exception of a small grant that we get around $3,000 a year from the CSCB. We conduct tree sales to raise money, and we sell other products that landowners might find useful, such as weed barrier to keep their weeds down. It's a 7-member board, and we're doing extensive outreach in the next year or so. The opportunities we have now, if you would like to get engaged, you're always seeking board member participation or associate board member participation. My guess is you should expect to spend 8 hours a month minimum. We would like to partner a couple of people for a specific workshop once a year. So if you have an interest in being event planning and those kinds of things, we can put you to work very quickly. We are developing a newsletter that we will probably start within 60 days. We've got the county database of 3,300 parcels, and we're grinding through that to build an extensive database so we can let people know what's going on in the area. We've recently brought up a Facebook page. You can find us there. And we've got computer and technology issues that we would like some help on. So if you've got 48 hours, 4 to 8 hours a month, we can put you to work on that. And that's our website down there, or our email site if you want to get a hold of us. Any questions about the district? I want to thank this group for having us on here. Thank you very much.
So before we get started with the meat of the day, I want to just give a quick, almost a caveat and confession that we're not going to provide so many definitive answers today. Hopefully what we can do is give you enough information and background and context and ideas about processes and potential impacts that you can ask the right questions. And hopefully the research community and with water and forest managers monitoring can start providing answers as we kind of step through with the landscape, with the beetles, with the trees further into this infestation, and then post-infestation, what happens with the future forests. A lot of what we're going to talk about is from a different system. It's from mountain pine beetle infesting lodgepole pine-dominated forests, which of course was the big bark beetle action in Colorado the last decade or so. So a lot of research has been done up there. We know something about those systems and how they've responded and how runoff may or may not have changed. Well, we don't even know that for sure. I'm giving that away. So a theme throughout this day will be how much can we extrapolate from lodgepole, from the lessons from lodgepole to the spruce fir forests, and in some cases almost entirely spruce forests in the San Juans that are affected by the spruce beetle. So we'll start just in a general outline, kind of giving a little more sort of spatial context, and first with how do bark beetles work, and how do they operate in the forest system that they've co-evolved with, looking at first large scales across the Rocky Mountains and the western U.S., and then zero down on the San Juans, kind of the pattern over time and over space of the spruce beetle infestation over the last 6 or 8 years, and then get into the potential impacts on runoff, how the hydrology may change based on what we've seen in other systems, mainly from lodgepole. And then talk about some water quality issues. And as part of that, because sedimentation is a major water quality issue and associated largely with post-fire erosion, we'll talk about fire. And then hopefully have a good chunk of time to have a group discussion to kind of, okay, given what we've just heard, how would you use that information? You know, what needs for monitoring and additional research can you see given your interest? And then talk a little more about beetles in the future, both what can we expect as the climate continues to warm and change, and get to something that Scott was kind enough to give a nice segue to, and that is we've got multiple interacting effects on our forests and on the watershed hydrology. We've got the bark beetle infestation, we've got changing climate, which is always incredibly variable under any conditions, and then the dust on snow events that have really ramped up in the last decade. So we'll talk about an effort by Western Water Assessment to try to disentangle those. But again, we'll not provide definitive answers, more say, here are the questions we're trying to address.